Hello everybody. This is a video that I wanted to make for a little bit now, but I finally decided to actually do it. So I'm going to be reading from a script because I don't have the ability to think and talk effectively at the same time yet. Hopefully I'll get there one day, but oh well. So don't mind me if I'm reading up here. But this is my take on what I consider to be a very important philosophy in my life and how I manage that with my Christianity. So I'll just jump right into it. So I wanted to make this video because I'm seeing a lot of people in my life criticizing my views on Looksmaxxing and the black pill. So for reference, I'm a self-proclaimed Christian and a believer in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I believe he is my savior and could be yours as well if you accept him. As for my views on the black pill, I don't literally take it because I'm not a nihilist, obviously, because I'm a Christian. I do, however, believe in a degree of genetic determinism. So there's definitely something there. Genetics, they're there for sure. They're very real, and there's not a whole lot you can always do about them. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Looksmaxxing would be the ideology I'm closer to, but I do not prioritize how I look above my relationship with God, or at least that's what I am trying to do with my mentality here. So I probably fail, but I'm trying, or at least I want to try. Maybe I'm not trying if I want to try and don't try. But so, anyways, I want to explain to you how Looksmaxxing is ethically justified within Christianity, and why it's foolish to view it as some alternative philosophy which wishes to separate us from the Holy Spirit. So to begin with, we need to unpack the arguments of those who say this ideology is wrong. So many people in my life have told me that this is fundamentally unchristian. So they will often say, you can't be black-pilled if you're Christian. You can't be a Looksmaxxer if you're Christian. The black pill thing I sort of get because you can't really be a nihilist and a Christian. It doesn't work like that because Christianity is your purpose. But when it comes to Looksmaxxing, I disagree. So first off, Looksmaxxing is self-improvement. So there isn't anything wrong with improving yourself. Obviously, though, this must be done in regulation. So you can place the improvement of yourself above God. That happens very often. And you also must ensure the improvement of yourself isn't out of pride, selfishness, or vanity. Now, I think that it's fundamentally impossible to remove those characteristics from anything ever because we are sinful creatures. I think that the idea that we're going to Looksmaxx without pride, vanity, or selfishness completely is just a lie. I think that would be naive to think that. But I don't think you can make the argument that therefore you shouldn't Looksmaxx, because therefore why shouldn't you do anything? You may as well just sit at home and do nothing at that point, because it's gonna, sin's gonna influence whatever you do. It's just guaranteed to happen. I will say that it can be regulated and your goals can be in the right place. That's kind of why I'm still in favor of this. This is not, it can be done right, if that makes sense, in this, as right as you can make it for a human. So you must ask yourself, why am I improving myself? If the answer is because you want to be better than other people, then that is your own moral failing, not the failing of Looksmaxxing, at least in my definition. So perhaps you would disagree with my definition of Looksmaxxing and derive it based off of what influencers believe. People like Clavicular have an awfully different example of what Looksmaxxing would be than I would tell you. So, it's kind of definitionally based, but I'm defining this ideology this philosophy as one without a moral influence at all. It doesn't really... Looksmaxxing itself does not believe in morals. It doesn't have a moral viewpoint. That's up to you, really. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. And you might say, oh, well, every Looksmaxxer I've seen on the internet seems to have this really hedonistic mindset, a lot of godlessness. Sure, that may be true. I don't think it's the fault of the ideology, and I'll explain why, but I think it's the fault of the people who actually make the videos. And that's unfortunate, but I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair to say, because so-and-so self-improves and is vain about it, all self-improvement is wrong. So that's kind of tricky. I think that's where that goes down. So I would like to offer some alternative answers to that question. So self-improvement is done so that I can be competent enough as a man for those whom I love. That's kind of a red pill thing. It's the same thing with looks maxing as a form of self-improvement, with the reward being to look good. If I look better, it's not necessarily for my sake, it's for the sake of those whom I love or I want to love. So the halo effect is very real. And so if you're ugly, then you will experience a worse life. Can people still be loved? Sure, definitely. But I doubt the human heart, the love given to those people, I think, will be lesser in value to some degree. And that gets tricky, and there's a lot of nuance to that. But so the term I use is, I said that love given to ugly people may often be less deep. And so not to say that all love that isn't ugly is deep, because that's not the case either. It's just easier for it to be if you live your life ethically. So if you're an attractive person and you're living your life ethically for all intents and purposes versus an ugly person who's doing the exact same thing, the attractive person will ultimately have a better life, but also probably be loved deeper. It's easier to love people deeply if you can look into their eyes. That's genuine. Like, I really believe that. And I don't say that out of some like situation where I'm looking down on people. I say that out of sorrow, honestly, because it just shows you how shallow we as humans are. But that doesn't mean that looks maxing is shallow. That just means that the philosophy is tackling the shallowness of the human heart. So you can't mess with that. Like, they're two different things, right? One thing I wanted to point out is that this idea that we as Christians are good enough to see past this is foolish. If you take two men, both are Bible-believing Christians with identical values and decency, the Christian girl will prefer one of them based off of how they look, height, intelligence, and masculine personality. And what I mean by masculine personality is probably low neuroticism, low agreeableness, and the success traits. So probably simultaneously being higher in openness and higher in conscientiousness, being really smart and creative, but also being really hardworking and orderly. So, having both those, tends to be a success driver or something. So, I guess that's a way where you could say personality is valued. And I do believe personality is valued. But I'm not blue-pilled about it. I don't think this is a blue pill take it all. I think this is a very realist approach to personality. When I improve myself, I am doing so in belief that it will lead me to a happier relationship in my future. Hoping that my ability to command respect from my wife, for example, will allow me to love her back more effectively. So, one of the things it's very clear in Christianity is the respect of the husband. It's just, I don't want to have that whole debate right now, but if you understand, you understand. There is also this idea that because I am looking better than I may have before, the wife I end up having will also be prettier, and therefore giving my children a looks advantage, which will also make their life much better. And dare I say, who do you listen to when someone tells you the gospel? The ugly fool or the attractive and intelligent person? That's a pretty big question to ask. It's not to say that ugly people who are lower in IQ shouldn't share the word. I definitely don't. They should, for sure. I'm not against that. But you have to kind of confront reality where it is, right? Like, there's people who will be taken less seriously because of that. Do I believe that's right? No. But I want people to have a chance, and they don't even have a chance if they don't even believe that that's true. So those people have the opportunity to improve themselves and actually be listened to by, even if they're shallow, worldly people. That, this is the thing. some people will say, well, why do you even want the opinions of these shallow people to respect you anyways? Well, because we want them to get saved, obviously. We want to be heard. And so there is value in doing anything that will hopefully bring somebody to Christ. So obviously, not all attractive people are intelligent. I'm definitely not saying that. I'm certainly not making that claim. But I am in favor of the IQ pill. See, I don't think looks maxing is the only option, but I see it as a necessary step to get your ideas conveyed. If I don't look good enough, no one will care. In fact, I don't look good enough for this video to be successful, and beyond my immature thinking, lack of speaking ability, and lack of self-esteem, my lack of highly attractive looks will definitely majorly impact the success of my ideas in this video. So that is pretty important to think. So some of you might say, you might disagree with that, but obviously it's the case. It's not necessarily the case that if I was like a Chad, that this would do super well. That's not exactly the case, but it has a higher chance of happening. You can't deny that for sure. The better you look, the more successful you might be. Intelligence plays a huge role too. Again, IQ pill, but this idea that looks are insignificant is just dumb. I don't see how that makes any sense. So this isn't about not being good enough. That's a pretty important point to make. Although you can fall into that trap, like I have for sure. But it's about being the best you can be in an effort to live your life the way it was meant to be lived. So some Christians will say that things such as surgery in your face is wrong because it changes what God made you, what God made you, and you are made in the image of God. So therefore altering that would be wrong. But they forget that we are cursed by sin and therefore not an accurate representation of his beauty anymore. So people will say, oh, I'm made in the image of God. Well, do you really think God is fat and gross looking? Like, no, he's not corrupt. He's perfect. So there's something to be said about that. There's a reason why the most attractive you can possibly be on these scales, it seems, on the internet, is a true Adam or a true Eve. Because the first people in existence were perfect, therefore making them genetically perfect. So you have to imagine the reason why we call the ideal a true Adam is because Adam probably was ideal. That was genetic perfection. And we'll never achieve that again. We've never achieved it since. Like it will never happen again. I don't know what heaven looks like, so maybe we all just become atoms, but but probably not. That's my best guess. So this is important because I think this shows that these ideas go deeper than the sort of superficial ideas of lust that our culture puts on this. And I think that's just a lack of understanding of looks maxing. I don't think people realize how deep it goes, and not in the negative sense. It actually has some merit to it. Now, there's definitely a ton of shallowness, but that tends to come from, again, other people's external morality or lack thereof, not the philosophy itself. Because, again, the philosophy does not, in my opinion, proclaim a morality. Looks maxing doesn't tell you what's right and wrong. It doesn't care. It's just a method to improve. So I would definitely agree that examples of looks maxing we have, such as Clavicular, I'll keep using him as the example because I'm just going to pick on him, whatever, are not an ideal representation. But you can't pretend like Clavicular is an example of what a Christian looks maxer follows religiously. It just doesn't add up. We have every right to improve ourselves, within reason, without being vain, arrogant lunatics. And we are not all going to be running over people with Teslas. Like this, there's so many people out there who think that just because you follow this ideology, you are like him, for example. It's just a foolish thought. Like, you cannot justify that at all. We're nothing like that. We're self-improvement is such a broad term, and that's why we have all these different pills. But if you go within the looks maxing area, that is broad as well. There is so many different people who do that stuff. And as one of them, I'm far different than almost anything on the internet. That's part of why I made this video, because I figured it offered a little bit of a unique perspective. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to have. It might be. Anyways, thank you for listening to my rant. I will probably regret making this video, but who cares? It's whatever. I just felt like it, so bye.